Okay, now before we get started, I'm sure that most of you probably already knew this, but hey, I'm late to the game and less observant. So if you're like me and you didn't notice what is the deal with this Jackenbacker, we're gonna get into it. So first of all, taking a quick glance at this bass, it's obviously been modified. So let's just touch on how it sits today. This is the EMG Frank Bello signature set, and it's got a volume tone. These are the Lee Sklar signature producer knobs. They do absolutely nothing. So VVT, Frank Bello set, and I took the gloss off. That's how it sits today. So the first time that we talked about this bass on the channel, I mistakenly wrote it off as it's a PJ. It looks like a PJ. It's got PJ pickups. Sounds like a PJ. And when you don't have a proper PJ to compare it to directly, it sounds like a PJ. You know, it's like it's not a Music Man. It's not a dual soap bar. It's a PJ. And also visually, this is a little bit of an optical illusion because at first glance, yes, it seems tremendously closer to the neck than your standard Fender PJ. At least for me. I can only walk you through what I went through. I thought, oh yeah, it's a lot closer to the neck. But then you realize, oh, it's a 24 fret. Of course, it's not closer to the neck is closer to it, right? And in addition to that, if it was closer to the neck, the jazz bass pickup would be farther away from the bridge or they'd be far apart. They look pretty close together on a Fender, and this looks pretty close to the bridge, so it's got to be a normal PJ placement, right? No. The optical illusion comes in because, yes, there is the 24 fret making you think, nah. But this bridge is a totally different shape than the Fender, so the saddle is here and the bridge ends here. That's like a full, like, what, 1.5 inches or something? So I didn't notice this phenomenon until recently. Josh was over. He brought his LTD Surveyor bass, which a couple years ago we put these exact same pickups in. So electronically speaking, this bass and his Surveyor are identical. Frank Bello set, VVT. He doesn't have the producer switches, but it doesn't matter. And I couldn't help but notice that when he played them side by side, back to back, together, whatever, they sounded completely different despite being electronically identical. Construction, of course, is a little different, but it's not going to factor that much into it being a dramatically different sound. So this is just yet another pickup placement matters a little bit more than pickup type, at least in this particular example. So for some stupid reason, I didn't measure them both when he was here and both basses were in the same room. I waited until he got home to ask him, can you measure the distance between the 12th? I figured the 12th fret would be a good neutral measuring point since the saddle's adjustable. 12th fret doesn't move, so let's just measure everything from the 12th fret. So he sent me pictures of the Surveyor bass. I asked him to measure from 12th fret to the top of the P pickup, 12th fret to the top of the jazz pickup, and the space in between the bottom of the P and the top of the jazz. So on the Surveyor, the 12th fret to the top of the P is 10 5/8 inches, to be exact. From the 12th fret to the top of the J pickup is 14 1/4 inches, and the space between the pickups, the bottom of the P and the top of the jazz, is right about 1.5. Now, if we compare that to the Jackenbacker, from the 12th fret to the top of the P pickup is right about 9 5/8 inches, and the space from the 12th fret to the top of the jazz pickup is about 13 7/8 inches. And the spacing between the two, the bottom of the P and the top of the jazz, is right about 2 inches. Now, those measurements might be off by 1/2 millimeter, but for the most part, those are the measurements. So we can see the pickups for these two models are placed at pretty different locations, which translates to a dramatic difference in tone that I honestly wasn't ready for. Because again, I didn't really notice that it was any different because it looks just as close to the bridge, and the 24th fret makes it seem like the fretboard extends farther than it does. But in actuality, these are farther up this direction, and they're a little bit wider or farther apart from each other. So I guess the first thing to say or recant on is this isn't just your standard run-of-the-mill PJ. This is a little bit different than something like a Fender or this LTD or something else. This is not standard PJ placement. And then the second thing that I couldn't compare until recently, because I didn't have one of these until recently, is that despite these being slightly different scale lengths at 34 and I believe 33 1/4, correct me if I'm wrong, 33 and something, they're not identical. I'm still learning about this bass. Yes, there's EMGs in it. We'll get to that in a future video. But for now, if you look at these two side by side, I'm going to look at the monitor. The pickup positions are pretty close to each other. Again, not 100% identical and slightly different scale lengths, but these pickups are placed very much close to a traditional Rickenbacker pickup placement than a PJ. So all that being said, I owe this bass an apology for writing it off as just another PJ with a Rickenbacker aesthetic. It's more than that. Yes, it is a PJ. Yes, it has the Rickenbacker aesthetic, but the pickup locations are much closer to what they would be on a Rickenbacker. So you really are getting a pretty good mixture of what you can expect to get from a Rick and kind of what you can expect to get from a Fender. Again, like I said in the beginning, and as I'm learning a little bit more, we're going to touch on this later, it seems like pickup placement has much more of an effect than pickup type or pickup variation. Obviously, ceramic to Alnico is going to be a difference in tone, yes, of course, but moving just an Alnico up and down the string is arguably going to be a bigger difference. So, again, apologies to the Jackenbacker. You're more Rick than we gave you credit for. Again, you probably already knew this. You're probably more observant than I am. I have other things to do. I'm sorry I didn't notice this earlier. But if you're like me and you didn't notice this until now, hopefully this was some information, insight, and hopefully you enjoyed it. So again, all the YouTube stuff, the likes, the comments, the dislikes, the whatevers, please try to be nice, but if not, it's okay. And I will see you next time.